Take a look at this map. This is a map of Manchester city centre published in 1889. Now you can see all the major streets: Deansgate, Market Street, Oldham Road, Fairfield Street, Oxford Street, and so on. It looks like a pretty vague map of a busy city, but those little red markers aren't just any building. They are every pub, tavern, inn, wine bar, beer house, and other licensed premises in the city. This is a drinking map of Manchester. So who produced this map? Why was it produced? Why were there so many places to get a drink? And what happened to them all? So this map was actually commissioned by the Mayor of Manchester in 1888 to help local magistrates responsible for issuing drinking licences. It's actually a hand-drawn map showing the main roads and streets, and all the licensed premises are marked in red.
Now, I'm not actually sure, but this could be the first time this kind of map had been produced for Manchester. I'm not really sure what the mayor and the magistrates thought about it. Were they shocked at just how many licensed premises they were? Or, in the context of the day, was that just kind of expected? Now, what they thought of it really isn't that interesting, but it's what happened next to where the story really gets going. The map was produced on a full-page spread in a Manchester Guardian in 1889, and it caused quite a stir.
Immediately, it generated a heated discussion about the drink trade and caught the attention of the Temperance movement, most notably the United Kingdom Alliance, who reprinted it as a single sheet. Their full name was the UK Alliance for the Suppression of the Traffic in All Intoxicating Liquors, and they were a temperance group focused on changing the law, hoping to eventually ban drink altogether. They have their roots in the Christian temperance movement, in fact, that around Salford and Manchester. Salford's first MP, Joseph Brotherton, was present at the meeting when it was formed back in 1852. This was an organisation hoping to do away with drinking. To them, it was the source of great evil: violence, robbery, lust, deviance, and to a certain extent, a distraction from living a God-fearing life. To the Alliance, this map must have been mortifying. Seeing this sea of red dots and marks must have both reaffirmed their belief that people were too reliant on booze, and also made the task simply overwhelming. In 1888, the total number of licensed premises in Manchester was 2,585. It splits up the alcohol sellers into 6 categories. Beer houses are indicated by circles. Places selling beer and wine are this L shape. Places selling sweets, which is an old-fashioned term for British wines, are O's. Licensed grocers are square marks. Other licensed food premises are triangles. And others, such as wholesalers, are X's. Now, there are some interesting trends to note. First, in the city centre, such as around Piccadilly and off Deansgate, there are a lot of L's, X's and triangles, not so many circles. So plenty of food places and wholesalers, but not so many beer houses. 2 of these marks down here, by the way, will be the old Wellington and Sinclair's Oyster Bar, which we've looked at before. As you move away from the city centre though, nearly all the marks become circles, such as up here in Collyhurst. Apart from the more affluent gated communities of Manchester's middle class, of course, such as Victoria Park here, where there are hardly any licensed premises at all. But then we come to this. The area immediately south of the city centre is almost completely covered in red. This is Hulme, and there's also a lot over here too, in Chorlton on Medlock. Now technically, this is a district in Manchester, not a separate town, but at the start of the 20th century, it was so densely populated that had it been a town, it would have been one of the most populous in the country. The sea of red marks is simply staggering. Alcohol was flowing through Hulme like a river, and people were drinking it as if it was their full-time job. In some cases, there wasn't just a pub on every street, but 2, 3, 4, or even more.
So this building here dates back to 1908, it says on the stone there. So younger than the map, but it survived the Hulme clearances of the 60s and 70s at least. It's nice to see it's still there. But yeah, so this all begs a question: why were there so many pubs? Well, it's an obvious answer really. Going for a drink after work was the social thing to do. It was one of the only forms of entertainment, especially if you're a working class Mancunian. Before the days of electricity, certainly before the days of TVs and radio, which were distractions and entertainment, I suppose, going to the pub and socialising with people, with friends and neighbours and relatives, was the best thing to do.
And it wasn't just the stereotypical working man going to the pub after a hard day's labour either. Pubs were the social places to hang out, to see friends and neighbours, to have union meetings, to talk politics. You have to remember back then that the music of the era, the music of working people, was folk music. Pubs were places people would get up and sing, instruments were played, and dancing broke out. Weddings, wakes, birthdays, how many people, how many celebrations occurred in these places? How many lives played out in these old pubs? How many good people, how many bad? How many of the old gangs came to some of these pubs too? And why so many in Hulme? Well, this was the most densely populated part of the city at the time. Row after row after row of terraced houses full of working class Mancunians, people who didn't have libraries in their homes, people who couldn't host dinner parties or have a cabinet full of rare liquor. These were warm, inviting spaces compared to home, which could be cold and even damp. Drinking was both the best way to be social, the best way to find entertainment, and of course the cheapest and easiest way to find release from the daily grind. It was also the source of many of the problems the temperance movement kept trying to highlight, especially when it came to things like domestic violence, robbery, and fighting. This is another map of Hulme today, and I've tried my hardest to show every pub I know off the top of my head in this area. Just look at the difference, it's unbelievable.
You see, the story of this map is not actually why there were so many pubs in Manchester, but where did they all go? And Hulme is a perfect place to answer that question.
In the post-war era, city planners really wanted to wipe away this part of the city and start again. To them, like planners up and down the country, poor working class neighbourhoods like this were a problem. They saw this as the slums, poorly built housing, bad sanitation, no heating or electricity. That wasn't necessarily the case for all the houses here, but in that post-war era, with good intentions, planners wanted to create working class neighbourhoods full of good quality housing and more breathing space. And so came the clearances of Hulme, the rise of concrete neighbourhoods and the rearrangement of the entire street pattern. Out went the houses and the old boozers. Planners understood the value of a local pub to a community, and so they set aside places throughout the area where a pub could be. Many of these were the newer flat roof estate pubs that became synonymous with council estates. But the community here and in other places like Collyhurst had changed now. Different people lived here and that sense of neighbourliness had dissipated. By the 1980s, Hulme had become a deprived area once again, forgotten about and for the most part abandoned by those holding the purse strings. Community spirit had survived, but with a high crime rate and no investment in the properties, the council once again thought it was time to redevelop the area from scratch. This time the number of licensed premises in the area was controlled harshly, almost making the whole area a completely dry neighbourhood. Kim's sits alone like an oasis in a dry desert. That isolation means that it doesn't attract outsiders the same way a pub would do in an area where other pubs are close by. Only locals and a few students come in here, so it's kept its authentic style. Across the street, the remains of the old Junction Inn stand haunting the place, reminding everyone that there was once something less safe, but also less sterile about Hulme.
So this one is the old Abbey Tap House on the other side of Hulme, and I think it's actually closed now. which is really bad timing, but also fits quite well with this video, I suppose. But it has its own place in history because it was here in September 1953 that former heavyweight boxer Len Johnson, turned community activist in this very area, attempted or did successfully challenge the colour bar. So in September 53, him and some of his supporters, some of his friends, came in here looking for a drink at the bar. He was refused because of the colour of his skin. Now, like all civil rights actions, this was very predictable. So Len rallied some supporters after being kicked out of the pub, and for the next 3 days, hundreds and hundreds of people gathered outside the pub here demanding that the colour bar be dropped and people like Len be served like anybody else a drink at the bar. The pub eventually relented. Len was invited in for a drink, even though it was actually mostly teetotal, and the colour bar across Manchester began to fall. So a historic pub, and unfortunately, I think now I'm standing outside for the first time, it's closed.
So why did the map go from this to this? Well, we all know the reasons. By the late 20th century, British society had just changed. More people had entertainment at home. Consumerism had redirected wages in other directions. The emphasis on individual freedom had eroded community spirit. With it went our folk music, our unionism, and our feeling of collective pride.
Yeah, I think that's one thing we kind of always forget about pubs and pub history is like how much a part they played in our culture, like in working class culture. Like not just the music, but how many football teams were formed in and around pubs at the end of the 19th century? How many bands in the middle of the 20th century? Today we still enjoy a drink, and of course today Manchester's still full of pubs and bars, just not as many as before. So in the end, neither the pubs nor the teetotalers really won. We're still dependent on booze for fun, but we just lost all the other good stuff around it. So yeah, as usual, let me know what you think about all this in the comments below the video. Are pubs today just soulless places people go and watch football on TV and listen to American music playing on their phones at the same time? Or are they easier, safer, and more welcoming places? Do they welcome more members of the community today? Is the decline of the pub the real reason our trade unionism went down and we lost our precious folk music? And of course, if you have any memories of these specific pubs in Hulme that I've been looking at, then do let me know.